Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here to celebrate more than 50 years of first responders on Sanibel. In a talk some years ago, native son Ralph Woodring said, "On Sanibel, neighbors helped neighbors helped neighbors." And so it is tonight. This program is a result of Neighbors Helping Neighbors, the Historical Museum and Village, the Community House, and the City of Sanibel. If you want the ultimate example of neighbors helping neighbors, look no farther than our island's extraordinary first responders. Tonight we will celebrate a history growing from volunteer bucket brigades to state-of-the-art professional services. To my left is a group of expert panelists eager to get started. We'll introduce them in just a minute. First, however, I'd like to present the two MCs for tonight, both with close ties to emergency responders. Well known for her work as a realtor, Phaedra McDermott is the only granddaughter of Sanibel's first chief of police, John Butler. Phaedra attended the Sanibel School and spent a lot of time at the rec center as a top swimmer on the first SWAT team. Tonight, you'll learn that the Sanibel Police Department was instrumental in development of our recreation center. Andrea Miller serves as director for that rec center. Andrea has deep law enforcement roots. Her great-great-great-grandfather was the first sheriff of Lee County. Her grandfather was a volunteer firefighter on Sanibel, and her dad, Ray Rhodes, was the department's first police officer. Please join me in warmly welcoming Phaedra McDermott and Andrea Miller.
Good evening. In 2006, island historian Betty Anhold and Fire Chief Rich Dickerson published a book, Sanibel Fire and Rescue, 50 Years of Progress. This evening, we will be taking a great deal of information from that book. We are all in this together. We learn from island history that this phrase defines the Sanibel community. Modern settlement of the island started in the 1880s, the lighthouse in 1884, and homesteading in 1888. In the early days, fire and medical emergencies presented life and death danger to the settlers. The occasional assault, murder, or theft threatened the peace of the island. Tonight we gather to explore the legacy of emergency services, all of the officers who serve in the Sanibel's fire and police departments and stand on the shoulders of early volunteers. Joining me tonight on the stage are retired veterans who are here to tell us about earlier times. Please hold your applause until I introduce them all. Representing the good old days, our first panelist is Ray Rhodes. Growing up on Sanibel, he started as a volunteer junior firefighter in 1965. Then in 1975, he was hired as the city's first police officer, serving from 1975 until 1987. Ray's partner in crime, Jack Prim, served the Sanibel Police Department from 1975 until 2002. He retired as deputy chief after serving for 27 years. Officer Dick Noon also joined the police department early on, starting in 1976, and then becoming a recreation director in 1981 until 1999, a total of 23 years. Mike Blackmore was another member of the early police force from 1978 to 1998, retiring as bureau commander. Bill Tomlinson joined the department in 1985, retiring in 2016. His career over 30 years included serving as chief of police for 14 years from 2002 until his retirement in 2016. Here to represent the Sanibel Fire District is Chief Rich Dickerson, who served Sanibel Fire from 1987 until 2007, the final 7 years as chief. And then from 2011 to 2018, he served as the Captiva Fire Chief. Next is Chief John Bates from Captiva. Bates was paid was a paid firefighter on Sanibel, a part-time employee of Bailey's, and volunteered on Captiva when he was named as Captiva's first paid fire chief, serving 26 years. And now, would all first responders in the audience tonight, retired or working, please stand or raise your hand.
Come on.
Yeah. Nice. That's awesome. All of you, past and present, safeguard our community. You have our deep respect and gratitude for your service. Thank you.
Before we call on our panelists tonight, let's take a brief look at the very early days on the island. So there may or may not be a quiz at the end, so you better pay close attention. Starting in the 1880s, danger from open fires was everywhere. Palmetto huts, wooden buildings, dry grasses, oil lamps, kerosene stoves, cigarette butts, discarded ashes, stills, broken glass in garbage dumps, and lighting. The very first Sanibel school, built near the corner of Bailey Road and Periwinkle in 1896, burned soon after and was rebuilt in 1903. Not once, but twice, 1906 and 1913, the magnificent Tarpon Hotel burned down. It was located near where the Causeway toll booths now stand. One time, early in the 20th century, 3 men pulled their boat ashore near the lighthouse to help beat out a brush fire. After the fire was extinguished, the lighthouse keeper's wife treated the trio to lemonade. Their names, Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, and Harvey Firestone. In 1935, a large brush fire on the Bailey property near Donnick Street left blackened stumps of huge palms. Another wildfire raged near Wolfert. In 1942, the Stewart family home near Gulf Pines was totally destroyed by fire. Located near the lighthouse, the Palms Hotel burned down in 1936. Hotel guests narrowly escaped by tying their bed sheets together, climbing out the windows in that fire. Also in that fire, writer St. Edna Vincent Millay lost the only copy of her completed manuscript. Islander Goldie Nave said of the early days, "We all had palm fronds, shovels, wet burlap bags, and Indian backpacks. For over 50 years, her husband, Alan Nave, served the community as a volunteer firefighter and then the chief." Yeah. An early resident recalled lugging an Indian pump onto a burning slough off of unpaved Tarpon Bay Road, pumping madly to produce a pitiful stream of water. So as you can see from the list on the screen, there were plenty of big fires that threatened life and property. Sometimes fire trucks from Fort Myers were brought over on the ferry to help with these big fires. After 1963, of course, those trucks could cross the causeway, and Sanibel trucks reciprocated, helping with large fires in Fort Myers. In the early days, the line between firefighting and law enforcement often blurred. In 1942, Peter Burns was drinking and arguing with another man. The other man, a mean drunk, doused Burns with gasoline and lit a match. He later died in a Fort Myers hospital, but no charges were filed. In 1943, Gerald Keeson died in a house fire. Rumors were that it was a murder or an arson. In 1950, Old Man Wiley lived on an island out in Blind Pass. He died overnight in a fire. A heavy drinker, he was known to use gasoline in his kerosene lamps because he said it always burned a little hotter. In the early days of the island, most crime revolved around bootlegging, gun running, smuggling, or poaching. However, the island experienced its share of murders in the early days. In 1906, farmer John Daniels was murdered by a farmhand, A.J. Chauncey, with a shotgun. Justice of the Peace, Frank Bailey, arrested Chauncey and took him over to Fort Myers. On Captiva in 1912, 25-year-old Gordon Brainerd was killed by a laborer who hit him on the head with a hoe. In 1919, assistant lightkeeper Richard Berry was shot and killed by Jesse Lee over an alleged insult to his wife. In the early 20th century, during a baseball game, Pete Jenny hit a man with a ball. The man collapsed, and Jenny fled to Alaska for over 40 years before he learned the man had recovered and was fine. Life lessons, yes, I heard that. If you'd like to learn more about early scuffles and crime, here's how to read about them. Once Upon an Island, known as Sanibel, co-authored by Betty Ann Holt and Charles LaBeouf, contains dozens of historical anecdotes, many of them pretty eye-opening stories. Policing Paradise was written by Sanibel's first police chief, John Butler, and it's a real page-turner. All of these books are available at the Sanibel Library.
I'm going to go without a microphone. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Today, Sanibel is served in 3 ways: the Sanibel Fire and Rescue District, the City Police Department, and Lee County's emergency services. We'll be looking back as our panelists describe how Island Emergency Services evoked. Let's get started. Prior to 1955, firefighting was a volunteer job. In 1955, both the Sanibel Volunteer Fire District and Captiva's District were officially formed by the legislature. Ray could tell us about these 2 early photos.
1955, that's Chuck Nave that's on the hood of the fire truck and Francis Bailey behind him. Francis always gotten all the shots. No. But that was a Dodge 4-wheel truck that had come from the forestry in, like I say, 1955 time. I think it was, fire chiefs could probably tell more, it burned a couple years later in a grass fire, didn't it? Yes. The exhaust caught it on or something at Casabel, I think. But that was the first fire truck. This was, my dad was the captain of the rescue squad. That's him on the very end. But this was, it used to be if you were ill, a hearse came and got you. And it was Leo Englehart or Harvey's Funeral Home. And they had done that and assisted the island many times. I'm thinking this is somewhere around 1963, 64. This was the first ambulance that was donated by Mr. Englehart to the fire thing. And I'm sure this will bear me out as I remember there was a gentleman named Sam Johnson that lived down off of West Gulf Drive who said he would stock the ambulance. It happened to be Johnson of Johnson & Johnson. So there was constantly some good material flowing in. So.
Richard Ray, here's a picture of Sanibel's first firehouse. Where was this located and what eventually became of it?
Is that to me?
Yes.
Richard Ray.
Richard Ray.
This is, it was built by, on Periwinkle Way, right next to where Three Crafty Ladies, but that's gone now, across from Mudbugs. There you go. Kind of down the road across from Mudbugs. And I believe that whenever they were going to tear this down, that Ralph Woodring took it and made it into the bait shop.
That's correct. It's now the bait box on the Periwinkle. It was moved in 1974. 1974.
Fantastic. Jack, moving to the police department side of things, can you tell us about the early beginnings?
You would think they'd go to the oldest employee. Well, of course, Chief Butler started the department, and Ray, you were there at the time, so you actually have better information about the early going than I do. I didn't get on till 1978, so I can address that. But prior to that,
well, when they, I applied. I remember Chief Butler said, "Well, we got to do a background on you," and he did the background. And when I got there and had to go through all the polygraph and stuff, and he said, "Well, I told you when you came in, I didn't want somebody that was troublemaker or a thief on the island, but he said I didn't want somebody that was stealing the hubcaps off the cars in the church parking lot." But he hired me anyway. And really, we had nothing. It was Chief Butler and Bill Trefney, who's from Connecticut, came in as sergeant, and Betty Balf, and that was it. And I was the fourth one there. They didn't have a desk or a chair for me, so I rode in the car at night. But we had nothing. As I was telling somebody, we had no badges, we had no uniforms. The Lee County Sheriff's Office deputized us so everything would be kosher and moved on. Eventually, we had to develop reports and figure out how to fill them out and all of those things in the very beginning. And now, Jack, that's close enough.
From the basic beginnings, emergency services on the island would develop over the next 20 years. Volunteers gave way to professionals. These professional officers were trained in state-of-the-art enforcement and resources. Emergency communication systems developed. Let's start with the first year of the police department, and it was quite a year. Who would like to tell us about this high-profile case?
Well, as you know it, everybody thinks Bowman's Beach was the place to go, and the circumstances were not the most pleasant when you got there. And we had a situation where it was brought to our attention that we're having a nudist situation at Bowman's. And this individual said that she would go along with this. She would sign whatever needed to be signed for the arrest of those who were naked. Unfortunately, I got the job of going up, and I remember one situation where I asked the gentleman, I said, "Where are your clothes?" And he said, "They're back in the bushes." And I said, "Well, we're not going back there. You're going in just like you are." I gave him a blanket, and when we booked him in, I'll never forget everybody whistling, and I said, "Welcome to Frank's Hotel."
How did I get put with the nudists?
Jack, you were new on the force, young and proud. You have a story about your first day. Would you like to share the experience?
Good evening. Thank you for all coming out tonight. And it's a real honor to be invited to be part of this panel. Now and then, many of us need a good lesson in humility. And having said that, let me take you back to 1978. Chief Butler had hired me and sponsored me through the police academy. And probably this was November of that year. I went into training for a couple days with Ray, and he turned me loose. So I'm out on my first day of patrol, and I get dispatched to the beach near the Sanibel Algiers property. I trust most of you have heard of the Algiers. And I was to meet a fellow there by the name of Bird Westall, because there was an alligator on the beach and a crowd of people had gathered to view this alligator. So here I go. As I'm coming out of the tree line along the slough, I can see about 20 or 30 people out there just glaring at this alligator that happened to be the largest alligator I had ever seen in my life. Ray, Dick, you guys know, I'm guessing 14, 15 feet. Marshall.
We name our alligators here.
He was well known because of his size, But I realized that it wasn't the safest situation that we happened upon with all these people. And so by the time I got them moved back a safer distance, I could see a gentleman coming out of the pine tree line, and of course that was Bird Westall. So he carried a long PVC pipe with him with a rope loop on the end, and I'm looking at that PVC pipe, and I'm looking at the loop on the end, and I'm looking at Marshall, and I'm thinking, I went to him and I said, are you planning to put that loop over his jaws? And he said, no, I'm not. He said, just step over there, I'll show you, we're gonna get Marshall to move. Well, so I stepped away from this, and now you have to remember, this is my first day out. I've got my brand new uniform on. I've got polished shoes, new leather for my sidearm. I mean, I was feeling good. Especially now that I kind of realized Bird was going to take care of the heavy lifting, and I could just stay back by the people, the spectators. So here we go. Bird takes this PVC pipe and slams Marshall on the tail with it. And unbeknownst to me, unexpectedly, this 500-pound, 600-pound alligator, lightning quick, did the spin around, the alligator defensive spin. Well, I didn't expect that. And as a result of that, my natural instinct was to step back away from that action. But what I hadn't paid attention to was the fact there was a big piece of driftwood right behind me. And I was airborne till I landed in the sand on my duff in front of 20, 30 people there that I was so proud to be protecting. And I had no choice. I got up, dusted myself off. In the meantime, Bird had continued to hit Marshall, and his whole idea was to get Marshall headed back into the Australian pine line that ran along the beach and the slough. And it worked. And it worked, and Marshall ambled off into the high grass, into the slough. I thanked Bird very much and put my tail between my legs and left.
Another memorable case on the beach that first year involved all first responders. Dick and Ray, could you tell us about this square grouper? And other panelists, please feel free to chime in.
Anybody had a square grouper in this group? Back in the day, being very astute at police work and being rookies, we realized, Ray and I, we were working the night shift, that shrimpers don't line up in straight lines. And there was also a freighter out there, and we had no idea as to what they were doing. But as it turns out, we ended up trying to capture as much of what was being done, and that was unloading the marijuana and the cocaine. And we had literally everyone there, customs, Blue Lightning, what have you. And as a result of chasing them throughout the waters and that of Sanibel, they started throwing it overboard. And in the morning, we would see some of our residents, younger at the time, they would be bowing. And we wondered what they were bowing at. And then suddenly you could see the square grouper. And we ended up putting all of what we could confiscate in the Sanibel Fire Department. Had it, we thought, under custody, and unfortunately, someone borrowed one bale. Ray?
I said it then, I'll say it now. I didn't take the damn bail. Well, the Coast Guard tried to help us out, too. They thought, we're going to sink these. So they drove along and fired their weapons, and all it does is it makes it just break apart and spread out. So then we had to rake it up from the beaches. But as a fire department story with this. We were able to apprehend some of the people that were involved because they, down off Donick Street where they were living, they set their duplex on fire because they kept using the hair dryers to try to dry it all out. And I don't know, it's a lot of work to dry 14 bales, so I don't know.
The big thing about this is, contrary to what people believe, salt water doesn't really affect the THC and what have you. And secondly, Ray and I and a few other officers that were on, we were burning some of this and being smart and right out of the box. I mean, we're ready to go. We realized that we should get downwind on this when we burn. And we did.
First
There was a rush at
responders
Ronnie
on-
Burns' pizza shop right after that, too, I remember.
John, do you have anything you want to add to the square groupers?
Just that when I came on, this incident had just happened before I was hired. And Lieutenant Renz, who later became the chief, filled me in on what had happened with Officer Phillips, I think, had a karate class in the fire station on that night with all of those bales piled up in there. And then, suspiciously, someone left the window open in the bathroom. And it was big enough for these bales to go out. So I was told it was 4. Was it only 1 that went?
Could have been 3.
And he also alluded to the primary suspect, the usual suspect, and that's helped lead to the hair dryers, I think.
The next morning, Chief Butler called Ray and I, Lou, in and said, "Gentlemen, what would you like to do after police if you don't refine this bale that's missing?" And he said, "You may want to broaden your horizon a little bit."
Our first responders, they're on a roller coaster, routine contrasted with life and death emergencies. This evening, we're grateful as our panelists share experiences that are sure to resurrect difficult memories. Any officer will tell you that the worst calls are domestic disturbances and accidents. The young police department solved all of these harrowing cases, receiving commendations for their work. In addition to this routine work, the Police Recreation Club was actively involved with the Sanibel community. Dick and Jack, you were involved from the beginning. What could you share with us about that?
Thanks. In my day, in the younger years, all through high school and college, I swam. And I got involved. I talked to Chief Butler about getting involved in what we call the Florida Police Olympics. I asked him if he wouldn't mind if I competed in it on behalf of the City of Sanibel, which I did. And as a result of doing that, there seemed to be an interest on the island to create what we call the SWAT team, Sanibel Water Attack Team, and a mosquito was our mascot. And I pursued that with the help of many, many people that I see here, June Minch, the Fentons, what have you. Just a wonderful time, and what we did is we started this swim team, and then the Sanibel Recreation Department came as a result of that. And Jack was in charge of that, so I'll let him address the Recreation Club.
It's somewhat of a misnomer, Sanibel Police Recreation Club. It wasn't really about the police recreating. We would raise money and we would try and set up community activities. An example would be, one year we got all the kids from the Little League up at the field, and we had one of the Kansas City Royals who used to practice here, a pitcher by the name of Hal Rabowski, the Mad Hungarian. He volunteered. We went and asked him, and he came out and put on a baseball clinic for all the youngsters. We had fundraisers also, like the King and His Court. I don't know how many of you ever heard of Eddie Feiner. A group of 4 guys would go around like the Harlem Globetrotters and do demonstrations, and we'd set up a team and compete against them, and it was only 4 of them. But this gentleman could throw a ball as hard from second base to the catcher as most pitchers can from the pitching mound. So it wasn't a serious competition, but a fundraiser that we would try and turn around and use for community activities. We did the Chief Butler was approached by Porter Goss and his wife Mario and asked if he would like us to take over the telephone book. I don't know if we had any books here to show. And so he saw a golden opportunity there, and we did that for, I don't know, do you guys remember? At least, yeah. So we did that for quite a while and had some wonderful experiences from it.
Thank you. Sanibel Fire Department, too, was committed to a community life in a number of ways. These range from leading the 4th of July parade to delivering Santa to Sanibel on a big red truck. Rich, John, do you have anything you want to share about your memories with 4th of July, delivering Santa, the importance of that community connection?
For Santa, we used to do a gift delivery. We'd have Santa dress up and go out on multiple, either rescue or fire truck, and we go to different houses and bring the gifts to kids. And it was 2 nights before Christmas Eve, and we would bring Santa on those Santa runs. And then July 4th, of course, we'd have a parade every year. And of course, it was always hot as Hades, going down Periwinkle with police and fire and everyone going down Periwinkle Way. And of course, we did have the canopy of the trees, and that was prior to Hurricane Charlie taking everything out as far as vegetation. But yeah, it was good community spirit that we were able to do with everyone.
I'd just like to add, if I could, it's a personal note. 1956 was the first time I remember Santa coming and the fire department being involved. And I went and sat on Santa's lap, and he gave me exactly what I wanted. And it was probably 8 years later I found out it was my dad. I didn't know it was him. So that shows what a great detective I am. But you have to realize that what they did was everybody on the island would buy the present that their child wanted at that time and give it to them. If they couldn't afford one, then Francis Bailey or the fire department or whatever would make sure that they had it. And then, just in case there were people visiting the island that came and didn't know about it and hadn't bought a present, they had presents for them. So the fire department's been long involved in that forever. I just wish they had told me they were delivering.
Yeah, because Dick Mensch was a big part of that as well, running that operation. I remember my in-laws lived on Lake Mirax, and my father was in town visiting. He, by that time, he's probably early 80s, and he didn't know Santa was coming. So we have a picture of my dad sitting in Santa's lap at like 85 years old.
Thank you for sharing. In Sanibel's short history, only one first responder has died while on an emergency call. In 1968, Captain Glenn Rhodes of Sanibel's Volunteer Fire Department and his son Ray were on a call together. We'd like to share that story with you this evening, and many thanks to documentary historian Ken Sneeden for pulling together this short video clip.
Was 18, had just graduated, 10 days out of high school, getting ready to leave for college in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And a call came in. They used to have what was called a fire bar on Sanibel. I don't know if you've heard of that before. But the fire bar rang, and there were like 20 phones on it. It rang at the same time in every fireman's house. But the fireball came out. I was just coming back from the beach, and my dad came out and said, we've got a rescue call down at somebody having a heart attack down at Hyers by the sea. So we went and picked this lady up, and right at, we're on McGregor, and he decided for some reason, rather than going down McGregor like we normally do, he was going to cut off Cypress Lake and go up to 41. Whether he thought traffic would be better or whatever in June, I'm not sure. But as as we made the turn, there was a bumping like in the tire. It sounded like a lump had come up, but something was wrong with the tire and the ambulance was shaking. And I was in the back with the lady administering oxygen, and Dad was driving, and her daughter was in the front seat. Daughter was probably in her 30s. But anyhow, he said, well, I don't trust driving this ambulance. I don't trust driving this. I'm going to pull over. So he pulled over right next to the flagpole at Cypress Lake Junior Senior High and called for another ambulance to come and take that. So I was in the back. Well, the lady in the back went into a cardiac arrest. So I was giving her CPR and using an ambu bag, and but giving her CPR. Her daughter got out. She was getting faint, and so trying to get her down. The other lady came back, revived. I was calling for him, but he never answered. So when the other ambulance they got there, he said, "Hey, is this your patient on the ground?" And so he just had a heart attack. But let's pause for a minute. Sorry. But it's just part of life that you go through, I guess. But in retrospect, nothing would have saved him. It was a massive heart attack, probably from sitting there watching the atomic bomb go off at those tests or whatever. Not quite sure what it would have been, but I guess it was a early indicator in life that, hey, stuff happens and you just got to adjust to it. But life went on,
Glenn Rhodes was my grandfather, also the butcher at Bailey's General Store, and a World War II veteran who took pride in service to his country and to the community, just like all of our first responders that are here tonight. In the video, we learned how the fire bar phone worked. Today, we can just call 911, but back in the day, emergency communication was not so easy. How did emergency communication systems develop after the fire bar phones? John Bates, this one's for you.
When I came onto the fire department, they were using both of those still, the fire bar and the plectrons. The fire bar, sometimes they would pick up the telephone at the dispatch and it would ring in all of the Sanibel volunteers and off-duty personnel's homes. And it would be a solid ring until you picked it up. Also, the dispatch would say what the call was, and then somebody would hang on the phone and repeat it to the people that picked up late. The trouble with the fire bar was you had to catch the person in their house so they would hear the phone. If they were out doing something, they weren't available. Along with the telephone was a plectron system, and that was basically a radio system, and it would send out an alert to wherever there was an antenna, and each of the plectrons came with a small antenna. It also sent out alert to, if there were a call on Captiva, it set everybody's plectron off up there, plus the one in the fire station, which was at the CCA at that time. And that plectron would set off an air raid siren that went high to low 13 times, day or night. And that would get the volunteers awake, no matter where they were. Both of those systems stayed there until we moved to the very sophisticated Motorola pagers, voice pagers. And then after that, regular pagers, and then eventually a 911 system, then the enhanced 911 system where they could actually locate you if you were calling, and then what we have today with GPS and all the rest of it. So it was very tough getting word around, getting emergency word around with those systems.
Thank you so much. If you build it, they will come. After the causeway was completed in 1963, the population of Sanibel steadily increased. The appeal of the island as a tourist destination grew. More people meant more crime, more fires, and more emergencies.
Captain Bates, early in your career on Captiva, you faced a fatal fire that remains unsolved. Can you tell us about it?
We had, over my career up there, we had a number of deaths on Captiva, not from fires, but this particular one was very unsettling because it was an unsolved arson murder. It involved a young man who was house sitting for people that were renting a house on the near Blind Pass along Roosevelt Channel. The house was practically new. It was a pod house with a separate guest house. The people that were renting it from the owners were on business and vacation in Colorado. They had a former employee stay at the house, watch their cat, and watch the Doberman pincer. In the early morning hours of June, we got a call. We got a call that there was a fire, and they weren't sure where it was, the caller. And again, the call is coming right into our fire station on a landline, not a 911 call. And we were also getting alerted by our dispatch now, which was coming out of Lee County, that there was a fire. They weren't sure where it was, west end of Sanibel, possibly the south end of Captiva. So we responded. It was a late wee hours of the morning, and there was no wind. The fire was burning. The smoke was going straight up. It didn't alert any neighbors. So what we rolled up on was a house that was completely destroyed, car parked out front, starting to get damaged from the heat, and the main house right next door completely engulfed. We had flames coming out of everything, including the front door. Sanibel Fire Department responded with us. We put all of our equipment, which was 2 pumpers. I had at that time 15 volunteers and 4 paid people. We were fighting the fire. Sanibel came up and relieved us here and there, and then kept a truck out for if there were another call, there'd be somebody to respond. We put the fire out. Nobody had been able to reach the person who was supposed to be in the house, David Gebhardt. And on further investigation, once the fire was out, we started doing overhaul. The house that he was in the guest house, and of course, if you can imagine, it was burned to just pilings. So everything had fallen down, and it was upside down. As we started to go through the overhaul process, as you would call it, we found that we got about 10 feet into the house under the rubble, and we found the Doberman pincer's body. And with that, the sheriff's department was there, and with that, they had us stop. We called in the state fire marshal. They brought out the detectives from the Lee County Sheriff's Department, and then we continued on. We unfortunately found the body of David Gebhardt underneath the mattress in the area above where the bedroom was. So after a lot of investigation, and the state fire marshal's office investigated the owner of the house, the people that were renting the house, as well as David's past. Because what had happened is David called his present girlfriend here on the island and 2 former girlfriends, one in New York and one elsewhere, gave them all the same story, that he had gotten a call that day and was warned to get out of the house or he would be dead. And he said, "I'm not going anywhere. I think it's probably a crank call." He gave the same story to all 3 girlfriends. And he said, "I'm going to stay here. I've got the Doberman pincer is not going to let anybody in the door. I should be safe." And to this day, nobody knows exactly what happened, what the motive was. They simply could tell from the investigation it was an arson and therefore a murder, and it was professionally done. So a lot of unanswered questions, and it bothers me to this day that that never was solved.
Goodness. What were the difficult circumstances for the fire at the home of Carl Astor, a much decorated war hero?
Well, that fire, fortunately, nobody died in that fire. And it started out a little bit comically because once again, wee hours of the morning, we had a storm coming in, a tropical storm. There were 2 of us on duty for that 24-hour shift. And about 1 o'clock in the morning, as I recall, we were in the bunk room. The doorbell rings, and the doorbell brings a big claxton in the bedroom. So we rush out to see what's out there. And firefighter Jay Halverson got to the door first. I got to the office, he was closing the door, and I said, well, what is it? And he said, we've got a house fire, structure fire, at Carl Astor's house. And later I find out Carl was in the house with his wife when the fire started. And as he tried to, they had smelled smoke. They weren't sleeping very well because there was coastal flooding warnings out that night, and sure enough, water was coming up around the Roosevelt Channel property. It was built out over the water. And so anyway, his wife said, I think I smell smoke, and he got out of bed, opened the door to the main part of the house, and it was solid flames. He told his wife to go down the stairs, go to the neighbor's house. He tried to call the fire department, but the lines were burned or gone or flooded. So he got in the elevator and went down the went down to the first floor. And he told me later in his Austrian accent, he said, John, he said, I was at the house, and he said, I got in the elevator and I said, Carl, your house is on fire and you're in the elevator. Fortunately, the elevator did make it to the bottom. He jumped in his, as I recall, it was a Lincoln Continental, drove to the fire station, rang the doorbell. Jay opened the door, and he was standing by the car in the dark and said, my house is on fire, jumped in his car and drove off. Fortunately, we recognized him and we knew where he lived. So we headed down there with 2 pumpers, taking one of our smaller pumpers because we knew that his driveway was one you couldn't get in very well. I drove that one into the first driveway, and I directed the other truck to go next door. So we're fighting the fire from 2 sides, and as I'm driving down the long driveway to his house, I run into what's about 2.5 feet of salt water because the whole place, the whole burning house is on fire in a flood. We're surrounded by winds, tree branches going down, and lightning everywhere in the middle of all of this. Sanibel Fire Department also responded, and I'll let you continue, Rich.
No. Yeah, I did come up from what we called Sanibel Station 2, and I remember Jay Halverson, who was the firefighter. I was with him on a hose line, and we were probably knee-deep water with lightning popping, power lines we knew were down. We're like, are we going to survive this night or not? But we did get the fire out with the help of some of the salt water. But it was a memorable night. Yeah.
We all have irrational fears about shark attacks, which are not very common. But when they happen, they're terrifying. Ray, Bill, can you tell us about the 1985 attack?
I'm Mike Blackmore. I was on duty as a sergeant when this happened. Call came in. I think Scott Ashby and I were on our way. He was a patrolman at the time. We get there, and this poor young lady, I guess, was hanging on the back of her boyfriend's, or her mother's boyfriend, kicking. Shallow water, the shark came up and got her. Almost, I think there was just a few pieces of skin left. So she's squeezing onto Scott's hand. We're telling her she's going to be all right. We get her into the hospital. They did a skin graft, and she came back and had no problem. I actually called the Sanibel Marina, the owner I knew had a seaplane. So I asked him if he'd go up and see if he could find the shark. We went up and down, couldn't figure it out. I sent another officer to the hospital and asked her to take a picture so we could figure out what type of shark it was. And she passed out in the ER. But this good story is that young lady kept coming back to thank all of us, the police department, the fire department, for saving her life. I don't know how long she did that, and that was one of those why I became a policeman type thing. It was a good story, ended well, so that was very, very good.
Sanibel Marina Fire. Both Rich Dickerson and John Bates responded to the horrific fire at the Sanibel Marina. Rich, John?
Yeah, this occurred in it was a summer morning, probably August, September, something like that. But it was shift change, fortunately, and Ron Ritchie sitting here in the front row. He was going off shift, I was coming on shift, and we get the call for a boat explosion at Sanibel Marina, at Martin, Ireland's Sanibel Marina. Anyway, this boat was called Bud's Bet, a 33-foot pleasure boat, and the gentleman that was operating that boat had filled it full of gasoline, like 200 gallons of gasoline. And then apparently he didn't either turn on the vents or open the hatches, and he fired up the engine after filling it, and it exploded, which the gas fumes will do that. He was injured severely. We got there on scene, and it was just chaos, because basically, within a matter of minutes, 200 gallons of fuel kind of spilled out of the boat, and gasoline floats on top of water. And we had fire just about everywhere in the marina. The bigger boats did sink, burned to the water line. We had mutual aid response from Captiva, Anna McGregor. We had a bunch of different units that came. So, airport, and the big one it seemed odd, was Airport Fire Rescue. Why were they at a marina fire? And it was because of the AFFF. That's a foam we use on gasoline fires. We ran out pretty quickly, and so did Alano when they came, as well as Captiva. But we got the fire kind of under control, got it all settled. And I know Ron Ritchie was on one of the Coast Guard boats. Coast Guard came as well to help. And they were pulling some of the tin boats that had been damaged out of the way. But unfortunately, they broke the foam barrier, and the entire marina lit up again. So we got to fight it twice, and by then all the news crews were there. So it was slightly embarrassing to think, uh-oh, here we go again. And it was all on film. But fortunately, we did get the fire out the second time. Unfortunately, the gentleman did pass away. We flew him to Tampa Burn Center, Tampa General, and he died a few days later.
Fighting that fire, you had plenty of water available, but that wasn't always the case on Sanibel. How and when did the IWA, the Island Water Association, and the fire department work together to develop a system of fire hydrants?
They were working on putting in fire hydrants, but it was easier said than done, because the fire mains were 3-inch, 4-inch, 5-inch pipes, and to get a fire flow of 1,000 gallons a minute in these fire hydrants, you needed much larger diameter lines. The Island Water Association, when it got put together as a nonprofit association, they were only charged by the county of making potable water, not fire flow. So they barely had enough water to get around the island, and it was a big expense to put all of these new water mains in. So it was well underway on Sanibel when I was hired, and Chief Renz was laying out where they were going to put the new hydrants on the different mains. And I knew that I was going to be the fire chief on Captiva. I was already the volunteer chief. So I said, you might as well get in on this, because you're going to have to do all of Captiva with them as well. But one of the things they ran into was with the high cost. That fire hydrant you see there, and underneath it is a valve, and that valve hooks onto the water main. And the whole thing back then installed was about $2,500, and that was a lot of money back then. So the attorneys for the fire district and the water company got together, and they determined that it would be legal for the fire department to actually own the hydrant and the valve. So we raised tax money to buy, and Sanibel did the same thing, to put in the fire hydrants. With the idea, as the attorney said, if you get into a conflict with this, you can always unhook your fire hydrant and take it out. So it's legal to do it. You're not a public utility. That got, when I went to Captiva from Sanibel, for example, there were only about 10 fire hydrants on the whole island, and none of them had more than 100 gallons a minute available. So I had sleepless nights until IWA got a new 12-inch main for Captiva. They put in, I think, 10 and 12-inch mains down Sandcap Road and got most of the subdivisions, and it made a big difference by the end of the 80s. We had water finally to put fires out.
The 1990s were a time of enhanced professionalism and improved equipment. First responders continued to attend classes, train, and drill. Water rescues, sorry, am I getting Okay, I'm just going to speak loudly so hopefully everyone can hear me. Water rescues, Jaws of Life, police boats, hazmat training, advanced life support. Chief Dickerson, clearly you're proud of some of the significant improvements to the Sanibel Fire District in the late 1990s, early 2000s. Can you tell us more?
Yes, yeah, it was a very dynamic time, the late 90s through the mid 2000s, as far as 2004 or 5. We had a friend a resident from the island that lived in the dunes named Dr. Bloomfield. He and his wife were very instrumental in getting us to pursue and go advanced life support for the fire department. Because prior to that time, Sanibel, Captiva as well, were basic life support. So we had O2, we could administer first aid. It wasn't much we could do because Lee County EMS at the time, as they do now, when they transport and leave the island, they left the island totally without advanced life care. So in 1997-98, we were able to implement it. We hired several paramedics from Lee County, or stole them from Lee County EMS, and they came to work for us. But it gave us a big advancement in care, from starting IVs to like a cardiac arrest. We were able to give drugs. We were able to secure an airway through intubation. EKGs we could do in the field at that time, and we would actually send that EKG to the ER doc so they could interpret it. Today they do it in the field, the paramedics do. So it was great advancements at the time. Yeah. As far as the new fire station, that was a project we started in the early 2000s, 2003 and 4. We did a remodel on Station 2 on Blind Pass and Sandcap, which Ian finished that off. Chief Barbeau is taking care of that now, as in building a new station. We built the new station in 2004, 5. Joe St. Cyr, who was an island resident, was our architect, and he did a fabulous job designing the station for us and getting it up and running. Those 2 years, though, 2004 and 5, we're going to talk about it in a minute, very busy years with hurricanes. We had 8 hurricanes cross Florida, 04 and 05. Maybe we'll talk more about it, like I said, in a minute. Charlie affected us in 04, and then Wilma hit us in 05. Coincidentally, in 05, when we opened that station, grand opening in October of 05, a week later we had Wilma, which, like I said, wasn't as bad as Charlie, but it was still a hurricane that did affect the island. Water rescues, we started looking into, obviously we're surrounded by water. Water rescues, we weren't lifeguards, but we took water rescue training. And one of the first things we did was get a personal watercraft and use a basket to do rescues, which eventually progressed to, as you see now, a fireboat. But we did a lot of training with Sanibel Police Department back in those days as well, with their boat and their personnel, as well as other departments. As far as the hazmat slide you saw a minute ago, Island Water Association carries like 21-ton chlorine cylinders. They've had some leaks in the old facility, so we would actually train with as a hazmat certification for all of our firefighters back then, and able to secure a leak if we needed. We also did a couple other things we did was confined space. There are lift stations throughout the island, and some of those are 15 to 20 feet deep. And we'd set up tripod and confined space rescue for all of our personnel as well. So during that time, a lot happened, and it happened fast. So obviously very proud of it. Yeah.
Thank you. In the years from 1990 to 2007, emergency responders dealt with all kinds of calls: alligators, refugees, hurricanes. Like the shark attack, alligator attacks were traumatic for the responding officers. In the early 2000s, officers had to respond to 2 alligator attacks on Sanibel. Both were fatal. Bill, could you tell us more about these?
Yes. On September 11th, 2001, everyone remembers what happened in New York City. But while we were all mesmerized and disgusted with what had happened up there, we got an emergency call at a gentleman's named Dick Steele's house on Rabbit Road. And he had been walking his dog in high water. We had a lot of rain that year. And he was walking between his house and the bike path that's behind his house. And a big alligator came at him to try to get the dog. And unfortunately, I think he was probably trying to kick it. The alligator got him by the foot and severed his leg off. So that facilitated a lot of education on alligator awareness and what not to do, what to do, and unfortunately also highlighted how many alligators had been able to grow and survive and flourish on Sanibel to a point where they were really everywhere. And the city was essentially forced by the state to buy into the program of culling some of the alligators. And they took a lot of alligators off after that incident. And then again, a couple of years later, when Janie Milsek, she was gardening at the side of a pond, and she had her back to the pond, so don't ever do that. And an alligator grabbed her by her rear end and just dragged her into the water. And again, that was a very traumatic incident. She did not, neither of these people made it. And it was very sad. Janie was a beloved landscaper and resident of Sanibel for many years. And it just highlights the fact that you have to be careful about the environment. It might be natural, but it's definitely not here to make sure you're surviving, especially if you're talking about an alligator. So.
Let me add to that. The Sanibel police did an incredible job that day. I mean, under pressure, they really did. They were able to basically terminate the alligator. Betty Ann Holtz here, you mentioned her earlier. You know, she wrote that book, the 50-year anniversary. Her husband was a volunteer fireman, but also was our mechanic. It happened right behind their house, and he jumped in the water when he heard her screaming for help and was holding on to her, I think with one of the Sanibel police officers. And when they finally, Chief Hamilton, when they finally, the gator let go, they pulled her out. But yeah, Betty's husband, Jim, was basically a hero along with all the Sanibel Police Department, the personnel that day.
In 2006, officers were called to a West Gulf beach with reports that a boatload of Cuban refugees had come ashore. Bill, we used to have a standing joke that every time you were out of town, we had these occurrences. So I'll throw this one to you.
Well, not every time. But I think it happened 4 times in a short, maybe 2-year period of time where Cubans were being dropped off at the beaches of Sanibel. And they're very compliant. They would be dropped off and they would tell us, oh yeah, they dropped us off here, told us to wait for the police to come and get them and give them a ride to Miami. So they said, yeah, this is kind of a good deal. We get off, we get a free ride to Miami, and they give us $10,000. So they were all excited about it when it's the wet foot, dry foot policy at that time. So it did happen a lot, and there was speculation that I was part of the conspiracy because I was hardly ever here when it happened. So they knew my vacation schedule, apparently.
Everyone in this room knows the power of a hurricane. In 2004, Hurricane Charlie was the first major storm to hit the islands in 44 years. When Donna hit in 1960, Sanibel was sparsely populated and developed. What do you remember about the response to Hurricane Charlie? Bill, Rich?
Well, Hurricane Charlie, like all the other hurricanes, they always forecast them to go to Tampa. I don't know what they have against Tampa, but if they tell you it's going to Tampa, they're lying to you because it's pretty much coming here. So Charlie was devastating to Sanibel. Primarily, it was a smaller storm than many of the others have come since then, but it was a wind event, and it was a very small storm, but it hit us directly at the west end of the island. And it really affected Sanibel as a wind event. It took out all the Australian pines along the beach, the roadways, and it really prevented us from coming back on the island. We had a team of, I think it was 60 forestry sawyers come in to cut a path through Periwinkle just to get us back on the island. They did an amazing job of doing this, but I think it was about 8 days that they cut straight. And we hauled all the trees down to the Island Inn tract where they were eventually burned and incinerated. But it was quite a thing that Sanibel went through. And again, I think it may have helped prepare for what was to come, but you can just really never be ready for the devastation that a hurricane provides.
Yeah, I may just add to that. Bill and I, that next morning, we'd left the Bell Tower Hotel, Holiday Inn. That was our command post the City of Sanibel had set up. And we commandeered a helicopter and did the flyover. And we were just blown away at all the trees. We didn't have the storm surge, but the trees down were just everywhere and roof damage. And we'd set up a command post as soon as we got back the next day. What used to be the BP gas station at the Periwinkle and Bailey Road, that was our initial command post. And it was a great place to do the Unified Command. The City of Sanibel, PD, Public Works, Island Water, Sanibel and Captiva Fire Department, LCEC would played a big role in that as well. Each night, though, we kept the island unoccupied for 5 days straight, which some residents weren't real thrilled about, but it really did help us get the island open so you could come back to the island. We would do a press conference each night at the bell tower at the hotel and just give everyone an update of what was going on. And I remember on the last night, we actually went over Bishop Farrell High School, and about 1,000 people were there, and that was the night we told them that you could go back to the island the next day, because if we didn't, we knew we'd be lynched. But the teamwork was just phenomenal between all the departments.
Chief Tomlinson, on your watch, there was a 100% clearance rate for violent crimes, including 1 murder. That's a remarkable record. In 2016, the Island Reporter noted that on just 1 day, you dealt with a murder case and 2 major drug arrests. But maybe you have a more lighthearted story you'd like to share with the audience, perhaps a bear story?
Well, we did have a black bear once, and it was making the rounds, as you can see. We had a T-shirt that commemorated all of its visits that were documented. And for the longest time, people were calling in and saying, there's a bear, and no one in the fire department or the police department had seen it. So we were just thinking maybe someone was pulling our chain. Until one night, my wife was driving down the road, and it was luminary night. She was with a friend, and there was the bear walking down the bike path on Sandcap Road. So it was confirmed.
You were in town.
And I was in town. I wasn't on vacation. So it took about 3 weeks to actually finally hunt it down and capture it. It was caught and transported out into the middle of the state, where about a week later it had made its way to, I believe it was some community in Tampa. It just wanted to be near people. It just couldn't bear the thought of being away.
Ba-dum-bum. Bear the thought of being away. Thank you for that. So before we close the evening, we have a short fun fact session. So we'll see if any of you were paying attention when the slide flipped forward the other minute. And in the meantime, if we could have Chief Barbeau and Rick Kennedy make their way up to the stage while we go through 3 quick Q&As. So does anyone know what the fire department's mascot was, unofficial, in 1980? It was not a Dalmatian. Not a mosquito. Panther. Okay, next question. Does anybody know the name of the first canine that served on Sanibel's police force? I hear one before Ralph. Conrad. Ah.
You had a gold tooth.
With a gold tooth. Now, the fire department is usually associated with the color red. Can anyone tell me what the color of the fire station on Sandcap Road was in the 1970s and why? Pink. I heard pink. That is correct. Anybody know why? Panelists, can anybody tell us why? Why was it pink?
Because it was built by Hires, and Hires by the Sea was pink.
Hey. So next we're going to share the mic with Chief Barbeau. He has a cautionary tale to tell about the emblems sewn on patches that are worn by first responders.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I hope you get that one right. I didn't know I was going to talk about that. I don't know the years of the patches or what we have, but we had an original patch back in the day that was actually a twin palm that we had in front of the station. and that twin palm was actually unfortunately taken out by the hurricanes. So the twin palms are gone. And our current patch, which is on all of our shirts here, actually has the cottages of the lighthouse. And the cottages are now gone. So we're just going to keep this patch forever and just make sure we have no more losses.
Thank you for that. Cautionary tale for sure. And now, as a surprise, we have Rick Kennedy here on the stage with us. He is the city's longest-serving police officer, beginning in 1981 and serving in the force in various capacities until 2023. He will be providing our closing remarks for tonight's program.
Don't forget fire commissioner, too.
Oh, yeah, fire commissioner for 12 years. I forgot that part. These are guys I grew old with. Fortunately, I stopped. You know, I keep going. They also know I'm not shy. And every story, okay, everything you heard up here, I probably was there. I didn't think when I came to Sanibel with my dear wife Elise in 1977, we built the Signal Inn, that I was going to go to the police department, hired by John Butler, work part-time for the police department, which many times turned into 40 hours a week, and stay there decade after decade after decade and see all the change that I did. But I do have to correct Jack Prim about the Sanibel Rec Center and the Sanibel Clubhouse. It was at the end of Bailey Road, and it was original Bailey store that's right on the bay. And he forgot the part about there was a large refrigerator and it was filled with beer all the time. and then the police Olympics was fantastic. We put teams together that you couldn't imagine. I don't know how many times Jack brought home for us the gold medal in horseshoes. Darts, and I think we had a couple golfing too, didn't we, Jack? Golfing?
Let's get to the swimming medal.
So, and the other thing he forgot, the first police department was, I think it's a Rebel gas station now. It was above that. And a gentleman by the name of Hap Payne was the dispatcher, and he never wore shoes. And he would come up there. And when you came down the stairs, there was a sign that says, open from 8 to 5. If you need service, call this number. So, and I've worked under every chief of police all the way up to Bill Dalton. And the bear, the Cubans coming ashore, the fires, the dead people. We lived on the island. My wife put my uniform out every weekend because she knew that there wasn't many people here. We only had 1 or 2 or maybe 3 officers that lived on the island. So I was always getting called out. But I can assure you, the police department you have now is as good as we were, if not better. They're better trained, they have better educations, they work hard, they're good community police officers, they protect you, they protect our environment, and they protect the wildlife. And that's a lot to say for a police department.
Can I just interject a thought? Again?
Sure, one.
All
You
right.
have 30 seconds.
I just wanted to clarify the Police Recreation Club building at the end of Bailey Road. That belonged to Francis and Sam Bailey, and they let us borrow it. We had our 501c3 tax exemption, and I was hopeful, foolishly, that they would donate it to our club. But the one thing I don't remember any beer in the building.
Didn't they give it to us for free?
And with that, I want to thank everyone for being such an incredible audience tonight, for your participation, for the laughter, and a round of applause for all of our current first responders and retired. Be safe.